So welcome everyone. My name's Justine Johnson. I'm the Associate Director at Kirkridge Retreat and Study Center in Bangor, Pennsylvania. It was just a beautiful day, is a beautiful day on the mountain. Here I can overlook Kirkridge's farmhouse and Thor's Gate and the labyrinth. I'll be sharing a couple photos of those to ground you in this place and space. We may have a couple people who haven't been to either of our places. And we welcome you. We are so excited to be doing virtual programs for us at Kirkridge. We're a retreat center founded in 1942. So we have this lush, abundant, strong history of providing rest and renewal, a space for engagement and discernment and social justice. And so it's been tough the last couple of months not being able to welcome people to our space. So we quickly switched online. And so I'm happy to welcome you here. I've been here about a year, and 3 of those months has been in quarantine with physical distancing. So it's been just quite a time to see what is possible. And I'm so grateful our neighbors, Columcille, said, yes, let's do this together. This program is possible. So Barbara, I'd like you to introduce yourself and a little bit about Columcille.
Okay, thanks, Justine. I'm Barbara Chaapel. I'm a member of the board of directors of Columcille. Have been on and off on our board for more than 20 years. Was a good friend of our founder, William Coey Jr., Bill Coey. Some of you knew Bill. I'm a retired Presbyterian minister in the Philadelphia area, and Bill as well was a Presbyterian minister early in his life. I think of him more as a spirit guide and widened his understanding of faith and spirit and community as he lived further into his life. Columcille, which is how most of us pronounce it here, but is Columcille in Gaelic, because it is named for Saint Columba, or Columcille, who was an Irish monk back in the 6th century, who left Ireland with a little boat full, a coracle they called it, of monks, and headed east. And the first place he found land was on the island of Iona on the west coast of Scotland in the Hebrides. And they stopped there and began a monastic community in Iona. And Bill Coey found that community, that island, a real touchstone place for him. And it's where he had the vision for starting Columcille in Pennsylvania. And he actually bought the acres of land, which is now Columcille, from Jack Nelson, John Oliver Nelson, who was the founder of Kirkridge. So there was an early connection between Jack and Bill and Kirkridge and Columcille. So we're a nonprofit organization. We are contiguous. Our property is contiguous to Kirkridge. Our trails go into one another's property. And Bill and his friend and partner Fred built a chapel. The land was founded, the park was founded in 1978, and they built a chapel in 1979. And then they added a stone circle. So we have a stone circle for those of you who know the place, and a bell tower named after St. Oran, which is open to the sky. And we have more than 80 megalith stones or monuments that were raised and are on the land of Columcille, and trails and a pond and several meditation sites. And we're now in easement. We're in an easement conservation to preserve the land in perpetuity with Heritage Conservancy in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So we're an ecological and a spiritual sanctuary, really. And we offer a place of refuge and respite and meditation and education for all.
Barbara, that was so lovely. Thank you. You've been wonderful neighbors to Kirkridge, and I think we have a total of over 200 acres together. So we are land stewards together in this journey of ecology and spirituality and being in community together. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I hope many of you have been to both of these spaces. They're quite gorgeous any season, but I wanted to share my screen of a couple recent photos or summer photos just to ground you in this space as we begin our conversation. So what I'm going to do next is share my screen. So you'll have images pop up of first Columcille and then Kirkridge. And we'll just talk a little bit about them so you can get your bearings of the spaces that we all love and build community on. Barbara, will you talk about these spaces?
Yes, on the left, at least of my screen, is the pond in the foreground. And behind the pond is the stone circle, sort of in the center, and you'll see the circle of standing stones. And on the left, to the left of the stone circle, is the St. Oran bell tower, which is the tower I mentioned that is open to the sky, unfinished. St. Oran was one of the monks who traveled to Iona with St. Columba. And the myth of his story says, it's a very interesting story, that when they were building the chapel there, their community, it kept falling down, the stones kept falling down. And finally, they decided by drawing lots that they were going to have to bury someone alive as a sort of sacrifice or to make sure the thing stood up. So St. Oran was the person who was buried. But then they thought better of it and they dug him up. And he said, they said, what did you experience there? And he said, the way you think it is may not be the way it is at all. And so that has become St. Oran's mantra, but also something that Columcille finds important, that the way we often think it is, in fact, is not the way it is at all. The picture on the right is a Celtic eye, which was built more recently, and you walk through the eye into a pathway, which is one of our trails, back to a meditation site for women and another meditation site for men.
Wonderful, thank you. I had shared some photos earlier with our Kirkridge community that this past couple days ago, where the land we share, the kind of boundary marker of Columcille and Kirkridge is our farmhouse, our oldest building on site, over 200 years old, and our newest building, which I just love holding that together, of the barn. We also have plenty of trails and a small pond. And I was just captivated on the trail of all of the ferns that just took over. And I love sitting with that idea of they were not here a couple of weeks ago and now they're everywhere and they are in abundance. And that's just a little bit from the photo on the right, which is this very manicured lawn with a newly planted apple tree. And I just love holding those images together, the wild and the tamed. And that's how we kind of walk these spaces together. So welcome to Columcille and Kirkridge via Zoom, and soon hopefully you'll be with us in person. So as we begin, I just want to give you a brief outline to kind of hold us accountable to time. As Barbara and I planned this, and I'll talk about this at the end, we had grand ideas. We were going to have a couple sessions, and in fact, we probably packed a little too much in our 1-hour program today, but we're just so excited to be with all of you to discuss what the solstice means to us and means to the land, and really how we nurture and love this space and place that is physically Kirkridge and Columcille, but also the globe. How do we really care for the natural world and that we're a part of the natural world? So I'm excited that you all are joining us, and this is just the beginning of that conversation. I can already tell, and I'm just grateful to Barbara that she's been on this journey with me and thinking, let's show these pictures and these poems and talk about this. There's just so much to discuss. So Barbara, do you want to start us out talking about
Yes,
the
I'll
solstice?
talk a little bit first, thank you, Justine, about summer solstice in the early Celtic tradition and how it was celebrated. It is one of the 8 festival days marked in the Celtic calendar. The 2 solstices, summer and winter, the 2 equinoxes, fall and spring, and then 4 midpoint festivals. In Celtic Gaelic, they would be Imbolc in February, Beltane in May Day, Lugnasa, which is the harvest festival at the beginning of August, and Samhain, which is the New Year, the Celtic New Year, coming to the darkest time of year, celebrated around Halloween in our calendar. So the solstice, of course, is a natural celebration all over the globe, celebrated in the Northern Hemisphere, either on the 20th of June, which is this Saturday, or the 21st of June, depending on the calendar for that year. It marks, as you all know, the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, the day with the most daylight. And that's because the Earth's axis is tilted the closest to the sun on the solstice day. Solstice means the sun stands still. Solstice, the sun stands still at its highest point in the sky before it reverses direction and the axis begins to tilt the other way and the days begin to lengthen, which sadly for me is going to start right after June 20th, but it will be very slow at the beginning. So it's the midpoint. It's the midpoint of summer. It's often called Midsummer's Eve is another word for the celebration of summer solstice. Ancient peoples back to the Stone Age have celebrated this day way, way back. And as I said, it's one of the 8 Celtic festivals, and the festivals mark the movement of the sun, marking fertility, planting, time of birth, time of growth, time of harvest, and time of dying and rebirth. All of them part of the cycle of nature. The Celtic Druidic word for summer solstice is Alban Hefin, which means the light of the shore or the light of summer. Of course, light is important to both meanings. And midsummer solstice was a time in the ancient world to celebrate the light. It was sort of a party time. It was a time of dancing and song and lighting bonfires on the earth and lighting torches and carrying torches, celebrating the flourishing of the natural world. It was a time halfway into the growing season. So the most lush time, in a way, of the growing season for plants, and not to harvest, but way past seed time, the time of flourishing, really, of the growing season. It was also a time, I found this interesting, of amity among neighbors. It was a time where neighbors from different places and different communities came together and shared community, shared amity, and shared celebration, shared food and drink. And solstice also always points forward to change, because even though the sun stands still, it soon begins to move again and transition into a new season. And in this case, toward the season of harvest, or Lugnasad in the Celtic tradition. So I think I'll finish by saying that I think in a sense, we are in a solstice time. We are in a standing still time, not only because of the sun, but because of the pandemic that has forced most of us inside. And yet we're also pointing forward to something new. We will move. We are moving. And we are awaiting a new season and a new life, and perhaps a somewhat different kind of life.
Barbara, thank you so much. That was wonderful and so informative. And I love this. How can we look to nature and the solstice as this time of growing and transition for us? And I think we are in a deep growing time, specifically for the United States, as we work in systemic racism and dismantling it, as we work in community to care and care for each other and be safe during the pandemic. And really the solstice is teaching us these things too. How do you embrace letting go of the old and the old ways that maybe weren't working for us, but we were just doing them? And how do we welcome the new, really looking forward and onward, and not just for progress sake, but really for the betterment, and really seeking nurturing and growing spaces. How can we support and build each other up in this time? And I really enjoyed, Barbara, this also admission that it's the longest day of the year of sun. And what does that mean? It starts to become dark again. So how do we find balance in that? That good can come from both light and dark, and that they in fact need each other. So as we talk more about the solstice in a couple of days, as we look forward to this, really, what does nature show us? And we turn to poetry, although I think Barbara is already quite poetic in her own words. She's chosen several poems. Some we'll send to you afterward, but two we're going to read now and engage with. So I'll share my screen. I will read the first poem. I'll read it twice. Just pause for a moment and then move on to the next screen that Barbara will read a poem twice. And then we'll talk about the steps after that. I just, again, want to prepare you that I'll be sharing my screen. The Earth is a Living Thing by Lucille Clifton. So Lucille Clifton is beloved by many people at Kirkridge, and we have long read her poetry. So I'm thankful Barbara had found this poem. The Earth is a living thing. Is a black shambling bear, ruffling its wild back and tossing mountains into the sea. Is a black hawk circling, the burying ground circling the bones, picked clean and discarded. Is a fish black blind in the belly of water? Is a diamond blind in the black belly of coal? Is a black and living thing, is a favorite child of the universe. Feel her rolling her hand in its kinky hair, feel her brushing it clean. The earth is a living thing. It's a black shambling bear, ruffling its wild back and tossing mountains into the sea. It's a black hawk circling, the burying ground circling the bones, picked clean and discarded. Is a fish black blind in the belly of water? Is a diamond blind in the black belly of coal? It's a black and living thing, is a favorite child of the universe. Feel her rolling her hand in its kinky hair, feel her brushing it clean.
The second poem, some of you may not know of Kenneth Stephen. He is a Scottish poet, contemporary poet, who has lived part of his life on the island of Iona. And I chose it partly for that reason, and partly because Columcille has recently partnered to have some sapling American chestnut trees, which have been endangered, as you know, planted on the property of Columcille. And they are tiny saplings, and our hope is that they will grow and reforest some chestnut trees on the mountain. So I thought of this poem as well. The Giver of Life by Kenneth Stephen. I see a man coming towards me across the edge of the shore where light breaks and cries in an endless voice. In one hand, he carries water, fresh and clear. In the other, earth, rich and crumbled. Where he stoops in the pale shadow, he brings forth to the treeless land a sapling, gently presses its roots in the soft ground. Mingling the earth and water for its strength, he says, "This is the life I give you, for storm and calm, for harvest and drought, for spring and winter. Grow for the light of the world." The Giver of Life by Kenneth Stephen. I see a man coming towards me across the edge of the shore, where light breaks and cries in an endless voice. In one hand he carries water, fresh and clear. In the other, earth, rich and crumbled. Where he stoops in the pale shadow, he brings forth to the treeless land a sapling, gently presses its roots in the soft ground. Mingling the earth and water for its strength, he says, "This is the life I give you, for storm and calm, for harvest and drought, for spring and winter. Grow for the light of the world."
Thanks, Barbara. So what we'd invite you to do at this moment is to really sit with those poems. I'm already thinking of the deep human and earth connection and symbolism, right? So I imagine and hope that your minds are wandering as well. But Barbara had designed these questions to really carry throughout the week and sit in this moment with where do we see this connection with nature? What can nature show us? And how can we live in and with nature? So what we invite you to do now is look at the prompts on the screen. I'll read in a moment. Sit with them for 5 minutes, and then I will remind us to come back to the large group so I can talk about next steps, which will be breaking out into smaller groups. Barbara, do you want to read these questions?
Sure, thanks, Justine. We're hoping and inviting you all to intentionally this week between now and Solstice on Saturday to every day either take a walk or stand outside somewhere near your home or look out your window into the natural world and consider one or more of these. Where do you see new life in nature? What does the sunlight illuminate in what you observe? What is standing still in the natural world and in your own life? And what does the light of the longest summer day illuminate in your own life? And we invite you to use these both in the week ahead each day, but also to consider them as you consider the two poems that we read and what moves within you as you hear these poems, particularly as Justine said so helpfully, as they connect the natural world and the human world, the connection between human life and the natural life.
Great. So as we sit together in silence, we invite you, if you would like to move to a window or outside as you smell the fresh air or hear the rain, to reflect on these questions. You're welcome to journal, but I ask that you don't get too far away from your computer so I can call you back. And for me, it's 3:25 Eastern time, so I'll give you about 4 minutes of just sitting with these questions or maybe some questions of your own. I invite you back, and then I'll talk about next steps then. You are welcome, again, to turn off your video if that feels more comfortable. And we will see you in a couple minutes. One more minute before we join in the large group. Okay, welcome back everyone. If you could finish your thought or come back to the computer. I think that was the quickest 5 minutes of my life. There was a lot to think about then. But we're not done with those questions. So what we're gonna do next is invite you into small breakout rooms with 3 or 4 people. We would love if you would introduce yourself in whatever way you feel comfortable, and then speak to one of those questions or one of the poems. What resonated with you? Perhaps you want to answer one of the questions. You're invited to do that. However the small group best works. You will be your own facilitators in this. So with 3 to 4 people in a group, we'll have about 10 minutes in that space. And then we'll come back. I'll ask you to use the chat box about what you found beautiful in that time together, sharing from your own experience, or if you want to speak to your own reflection or journaling. So as I open the breakout rooms, a screen will pop up on your Zoom, and you'll click Join Breakout Room, and it'll have the number. I will give you a 2-minute reminder. And when I close the rooms, it'll say you'll have 30 or 60 seconds to join back to our larger group. And then we'll see everyone there. Barbara, is there anything you wanted to mention before I whisk everyone away?
No, I don't think so. Thanks.
Wonderful. Okay, see you all soon. Well, wonderful. Welcome back, everyone. So I was saying I wish I could pop into all the rooms. In the rooms I was in, it was just so fruitful about what you all gleaned from the spaces and the poems and the prompts and from each other. So if you'd like, if you feel comfortable, I invite you to use the chat box again on the bottom of your screen. You hover and click on it and you can type to everyone. Maybe something again from your own personal experience. What resonated with you? What did you connect with? Or what has nature shown you that you feel comfortable sharing in the chat box? And I can read a couple as Barbara and I talk about really what we've learned from nature and the activities in our last 15 minutes, how we go about the rest of the week, knowing that the solstice is upon us. So if you feel comfortable, you can use the chat box. I love hearing the clicking. One thing I heard a lot of, and I also identify with, so I'll speak from my experience, is that when I take a walk in nature, it feels so incredibly healing. And that I can remember to be kind to myself because nature is kind to me. Paula in the chat box shared the first hummingbird of the season came by during the poems. What a lovely gift. Another bird's noticing birds, Brenda says, and animals show up this week. Wait, anything else? I love the noticing of the details. Margaret, the coming of longer days and warmth and light expands the world for me and my experience in it. Wonderful, Margaret. Diane, your birthday's on the winter solstice.
Oh.
Happy belated. Honoring the summer solstice. So grow for the light of the world. the green of the trees against the tree branches. The brown pelicans have found their way back to Rehoboth.
Oh, nice.
A black bear, that's lovely, Susan.
Hmm.
Okay. So Reverend Tom writes, as we have been sheltering in place and not out and about so much, it's interesting to see how the local wild animals are venturing into our community. Absolutely. We've seen nationally in the US a lot of those stories.
Mm-hmm.
Sally, the fairies and gnomes in my garden. I love it. Jean, enjoying the growth of the plants, deer, squirrels, chipmunks. Pat encourages us to look at solsticecelebration.com. Thank you, Pat. Oh, I love this. Being in nature helps us feel safe, happy, and alive. Thank you, Patricia. So I think those are wonderful notes. Thank you all for sharing. There's a lot of messages in nature as well if we slow down and take the time to look at the details. I used to be a hiker who just focused on my time, like how many miles can I get in the daylight. And now I stop and try and find mushrooms, and I try and identify birds. And really what I've learned from nature is that there's still a deep, even more deep connection without the internet. And that's a good lesson for me to learn as a 34-year-old, that I am living in abundance in this time. And the solstice is one of those things I can look forward to pay attention to the details and notice what life is showing me all around me. Of course, I have the privilege of living at Kirkridge and welcoming you, but I have this gorgeous space to show me the way. So Barbara, did you want to talk a little bit in our last minutes together about what activities we can do during this week and on the solstice? And I'll popcorn in.
Okay. As I suggested, I think earlier, I would invite you each to take an intentional time each of the next 5 days from tomorrow until Saturday, either on a walk or sitting or standing outdoors in a place that's meaningful to you, including your own deck or your own yard, or just open a window onto nature that surrounds your home. And see what you can take in with your 5 senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What might you smell? What can you touch and feel? And what might you taste? And you might want to journal about that if you're a journaler, or even if you're not a journaler, I would invite you to make a few little notes about that each day and have that be a marker for the 5 days between now and solstice. And you might notice, as Justine said about the small mushrooms, what are the small things that you see? Not just the big things. What are the small, precious signs that there is new life and that light is in the world? Justine, do you want to add a couple?
Thank you. So Barbara and I had both come up with these gorgeous lists and so full. And we also didn't want to put it on another slide. And I have a private chat, and it's a good reminder that I will email these slides, the prompts, the poems, and some of our suggestions out. But that was my first one too, is just get grounded. If you have a 2 by 2 foot of lawn, take off your shoes and socks. No one's looking at your feet, and just plant them on the ground and connect. Get dirty in the soil and listen to the birds, look up. So really connecting with nature and getting outside. We've seen many, many people on the Appalachian Trail. So that's right above our property and on Kirkridge property. And I wish I could talk to them all about Leave No Trace. Really, we are nature and nature is us. And so respecting that is my other really tip into the solstice, is gratitude for all living things, all living creatures, including our earth, the grass, the animals we see, the water we consume, paying gratitude for it. And that reminds me of Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Reading that book was really a walkway into learning about indigenous ways of being. So that would be another recommendation of mine, is honoring Native and Indigenous ways of knowing, being, farming, harvesting, being present with nature. And I'm happy to send those references on. So again, gratitude and learning other cultures or your own culture and how it interacts with nature historically and in present day.
Let me add too that you might think about color as you go through these next 5 days. What colors are you seeing in nature? And when I chose and heard Justine read the poem by Lucille Clifton, I realized that the beauty of the color black in nature is not something that I think of very often. I think of green, I think of blue for the sky, maybe flowers that are pink or yellow, but her highlighting the beauty of the black bear and the black pond in which the fish belly swims, and the black coal in which the diamond is found. The beauty of black as a color in nature. And I think it was Paula, one of the people in our chat room, talked about the loon in Maine and the black and white coat or clothing of the feathers of the loon. And so it occurred to me that light illuminates all color, right? The light of the sun illuminates all color. It is not a color in that sense, but it illuminates all. So that's another thing that you might want to think about or notice as you're walking or as you're watching.
Thanks, Barbara. I think again about the details of that, right? Just noticing as we walk through this world, as we are a part of this world, that natural world, and also the ways we know and work and love and live. There are very specific solstice related activities you can do on the day of, which would be, Barbara talked a little bit about setting or making rituals, maybe finding your own way to honor this part of the year. And for many people, that's having some sort of fire ritual, having a bonfire that night, lighting candles, and setting intentions. Again, letting go of the past and looking to the future. What do you hope to keep, strengthen, and build upon? Or maybe learn a new activity, an outdoor activity. So again, those are for the day of. And Barbara and I have been in deep conversation about really living this work. And an add-on a very important component about this is for both Kirkridge and Columcille to make our outdoor spaces, indoor spaces, more equitable spaces. So really learning and unlearning historical roots of oppression and racism and systemic hierarchies, and how we can make spaces for everyone, involved with everyone. So that again is reading more, learning more, having conversations again about that connection that we started with. How do we really love this land together? And I think we have a long way to go, but we're so excited you are here with us and wanting to learn more about that. Barbara, I can't believe our 55 minutes are already passed.
I know, it's flown, but it's been so wonderful. Justine, I want to thank you for inviting me from Columcille to be a partner in this. And Justine and I both hope that this will be a way to move forward together. We're partners on the mountain, we're neighbors on the mountain, and we have similar concerns for the land and for stewardship of the land. And so we're happy to be together. Thank you for inviting me, Justine.
Absolutely. And I think before we leave, we just wanted to give a quick update because we are neighbors. We're learning a lot about each other. And Barbara, do you want to share what's happening at Columcille?
Yes, I'll just be brief. Columcille is open during the pandemic, meaning the land and the trails are open for anyone who wishes to come. The buildings, we have 3 buildings, the chapel, Casa Column, which is the house, and the Voyagers Lounge, which has newly moved to the lower level of the house. They are closed for the time being, but the land is open. We are not having any programs. We usually have programs to celebrate and recognize each of those 8 festivals that I mentioned. At the moment, we're not having any of those, and we're not having any other programs. So the board meets regularly to reassess that. But for the moment, the land is open, the trails are open, but the programs and the buildings are not.
Great, Barbara, thank you. So Kirkridge is slightly different in the space that we have overnight spaces. So we are still remaining physically closed, although you see us doing virtual programs. We have at least 2 a week. And as we look to the fall, and hopefully there are some vaccines for COVID-19, we're in the space of unknowing, but virtual programs will continue to happen until we know more. Another exciting opportunity for us and Columcille is that we were awarded a grant from the Kittatinny Ridge Foundation working on linking our hands and hearts. So really learning about the land, loving the land, including trail maintenance. So I need some help with that, and really learning about each other. That will start in August as I work with Columcille to determine what's best moving forward. Maybe it's a hybrid of physical and virtual programming. How do we best serve our communities and the land in this time of social and physical distancing? So please stay tuned for that. I'm really excited that we are partners, intentional partners on building love into our land. And that makes it 4 o'clock Eastern time for us. So I'm so grateful you spent time. What we hope happens next is you continue to walk this week mindful of our program together, the poems, prompts, and the small sharing that happened in the groups. Tomorrow, I will send out this recording, all of the slides, including the poems and the prompts, and then a couple other resources that we think would be beneficial for you to have. I'll also invite you to complete a survey as we are learning and growing in this time, and I would love to have your feedback on what else you would like to see and how else we can incorporate programming. And if you have any other questions, comments, feedback, I would love to hear it. But thank you all so much for joining with us for the last hour, and I hope you are well and you stay well. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Blessings to everyone.
Thank you.
Blessings to
Blessings.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Have your day.
Bye-bye.
Justine, so beautiful.